Captain Elias Ward stood on the observation deck of the human fleet's flagship, staring at the massive Arvelian cruiser that floated silently against the backdrop of the galaxy. The stars reflected in his dark eyes as he tried to process the unusual situation that had been thrust upon him. The Arvelians, a proud and ancient species, had never sent humans gifts before. And now, this was no ordinary gift. They had sent him Princess Lyra, a young alien of royal blood whose very existence had been considered a disgrace among her people. They whispered across the empire that she was barren, a princess who could never bear an heir and therefore useless. Yet here she was aboard a human vessel, offered to him as a token of diplomacy. Elias didn't trust the whispers. He knew too well how rumors could twist the truth. And while some of his fellow officers regarded this mission with sarcasm or disdain, Elias treated it with quiet responsibility. He did not see the princess as a tool or an object. He saw her as a human being, or at least something close to that in the unfamiliar ways of the Arvelians. The docking clamps released, and the massive doors of the Arvelian cruiser opened. A single shuttle descended and docked with precision. From it emerged Princess Lyra, her tall figure framed by the sleek light of the docking bay. She was beautiful in the alien sense, tall, graceful, with pale violet skin and hair that shimmered like spun silver. Her eyes were an unusual mix of amber and teal, reflecting intelligence and caution. The translators activated, and her voice echoed softly in Elias's ears. "I am Princess Lyra of Arvelia," she said, her tone formal, cold, and carefully measured. "I am to be under your protection until further instructions from the council." Elias stepped forward, bowing slightly, though not in submission. It was a gesture of respect. "Welcome to Earth's fleet, Princess. I am Captain Elias Ward. You are not here as a prisoner. You will have your own quarters, your own freedom, and your own choice in how to live during your stay." Lyra studied him carefully, her expression guarded. She had expected mockery, pity, or worse, but his voice did not carry any arrogance, only calm authority. Still, she did not reply immediately. Her hands, covered in the delicate silk gloves typical of her people, clenched slightly at her sides. She had been handed over by her own people, labeled defective, and now she was to live among a species she barely understood. The journey from the Arvelian cruiser to the human flagship was quiet, punctuated only by the soft hum of engines. Elias showed her the quarters prepared for her, a room with a view of the stars, a small garden of carefully cultivated Arvelian plants, and a communication console she could use to contact her people if she wished. It was a gesture meant to convey care, yet Lyra's eyes flickered with suspicion. She had been taught that humans were unpredictable and often untrustworthy. But the room, the flowers, the quiet consideration, it was unlike anything she had encountered before. Days passed, and Lyra moved slowly through the routines of the human fleet. She observed the crew at work, noting the differences in structure, language, and hierarchy. The humans were chaotic at times, but there was a warmth in their interactions, a camaraderie she did not see among her own people. They laughed freely, helped each other without hesitation, and respected her presence without expecting anything in return. Elias watched her closely. He did not force conversation, but he did not ignore her either. He asked about her favorite foods, her home planet, and the stories of her childhood. He did not inquire about her condition, about the rumors of her barrenness. He respected the privacy that had been denied to her in her own palace. Slowly, Lyra began to respond. Her voice softened over time, her eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope. One evening, Elias led her to the observation deck. The stars stretched infinitely before them, a tapestry of light that made even the most disciplined human pause in awe. "Do you like it?" he asked. "Earth's night sky is different from Arvelia's, but it has its own beauty." Lyra nodded. "It is. Quiet. Peaceful. I never thought I would see the stars like this without orders, without guards. I did not think freedom could feel so strange." "You are free here," Elias said simply. "You can move as you like. You can speak as you like. You are not a gift or a pawn in some game of politics. You are a person." For the first time in months, maybe years, Lyra allowed herself a small smile. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it was real. The seeds of trust were being planted. She had expected mockery and humiliation, yet here was someone who treated her as an equal, as someone capable of thought, feeling, and choice. Rumors, of course, spread quickly. Some humans whispered among themselves that the Arvelians must have intended this as a joke, sending a princess who could never bear heirs. Some aliens who observed the fleet through diplomatic channels were equally skeptical, but Elias did not listen. He did not care for gossip or ridicule. His focus was simple. He would protect the princess and he would treat her with dignity. Lyra began to explore the ship herself. At first she kept to the quarters, preferring solitude. But curiosity won over caution. She learned the names of the crew, the basic functions of the vessel, and even assisted the engineers with minor tasks using her own advanced knowledge. Her intelligence was undeniable, and humans began to respect her presence not as a curiosity, but as a valuable member of the fleet. It was during a routine council meeting that an officer, clearly unaware of the bond forming between Elias and Lyra, made a cutting remark. "You were given a gift," he said, looking pointedly at Elias, "and yet you treat her like a guest. A princess who can bear no children. A useless gift. How noble of you." The room went silent. All eyes turned toward Elias, awaiting his response. The captain stood calmly, then said firmly, "She is not a gift. She is a person, and she will be treated as such. If you cannot respect that, leave." Lyra, seated nearby, felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. No one had ever defended her so openly, so fiercely. Not her advisors, not her guards, not even her own family. The humans could be brash, and Elias could be blunt, but his respect was unwavering. That night Lyra could not sleep. She walked to the observation deck, staring at the stars, contemplating a life that had suddenly become possible. Over time, something unexpected happened. Lyra began to enjoy her presence among humans. She laughed quietly at their jokes, offered advice on navigation, and even shared stories from her childhood. She discovered music she liked, simple stories of Earth's past, and games that made her smile. She realized she had begun to trust Elias in ways she had never trusted anyone. He had seen her as more than her label, more than her condition, more than the word Barren. Elias noticed the change too. He saw how her shoulders relaxed when she thought no one was watching. He saw how her eyes lingered on the small human touches she had once dismissed. A flower on the table, a chair pulled out for her, a simple conversation without duty attached. He never pressed her, never asked more than she wished to share. One evening, as the fleet traveled through a quiet sector of space, an Arvelian envoy arrived unexpectedly. Their ship was small, fast, and bristling with authority. Lyra's heart sank. She had expected that this day would come. Her people would want her back. She feared their words, their disappointment, and their judgment. Elias approached her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "They are diplomats," he said quietly. "You have done nothing wrong. Stand tall." Lyra took a deep breath and entered the meeting chamber with Elias at her side. The Arvelian envoy looked at her with thinly veiled disdain. "Princess Lyra," one of them said, "we have come to assess your status. You were sent to humans under our orders, and now we seek confirmation of your condition." The word stung. But Lyra felt a strength she had never known before. She met their gaze without flinching. "I am under the protection of Captain Elias Ward," she said firmly. "I am treated as a person, not as an object. I will answer no questions that violate my dignity," the Arvelian envoy faltered. They had expected a frightened, submissive princess. Instead, they were met with confidence, with courage, with the presence of someone who had discovered her own worth. The envoy bowed stiffly, then retreated, leaving Lyra and Elias standing side by side. As the doors closed, Lyra turned to Elias, her eyes reflecting gratitude and something deeper. You treat me as if I matter," she whispered. "You do matter," Elias replied simply. "Not because of your title, not because of who sent you, but because of who you are. That is all that ever mattered." For the first time in her life, Lyra allowed herself to truly feel hope. A hope that perhaps she could belong, not just among humans, but somewhere in the galaxy where she was respected and valued. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she believed she could shape it herself. And in the quiet of the observation deck, under the endless stars, a bond began to form. One built not on duty, not on politics, but on trust, respect, and the quiet power of being seen for who she truly was. The Barren princess was beginning to feel alive again, and the seeds of a story far greater than she had ever imagined were quietly being planted. The weeks that followed the arrival of the Arvelian envoy passed quietly, yet a subtle tension lingered aboard the human fleet. Princess Lyra had grown more confident, moving through the corridors with grace and purpose. The crew began to treat her not as a gift or curiosity, but as a respected figure among them. Elias continued to watch over her, though now his protection was no longer just duty. It had grown into a deep, unspoken trust. Lyra had begun to smile more often, laugh more freely, and even speak of hopes she had once hidden away. One morning, while walking along the observation deck, Lyra paused to gaze at a cluster of stars that twinkled like scattered jewels. Elias approached quietly, respecting her solitude. "They are beautiful," he said. Lyra nodded, her hands clasped behind her back. "They are alive somehow. Each one seems to have its own story, its own purpose." "That's how I see people," Elias said softly. "Each life has a purpose, even when others doubt it, even when they say someone is worthless." Lyra turned her gaze to him. She remembered the whispers, the cruel remarks from her own people about her being barren. For the first time, those words felt distant, irrelevant. "And you believe I have a purpose?" she asked quietly. Elias smiled, the kind of gentle smile that carried reassurance without pity. "I don't just believe it. I know it." Days passed in this rhythm of quiet companionship. Lyra explored the fleet, learned about human technology, and even offered insight into some of Arvelia's scientific principles. She discovered joy in simple tasks, helping engineers, planting small Arvelian flowers in the ship's courtyard, and even attending strategy meetings. The crew's attitude toward her shifted further, respect replacing skepticism. They saw her courage, her intelligence, and her emerging bond with Elias, and slowly, the whispers of doubt faded into admiration. Then, one quiet evening, Lyra began to feel unusual discomfort. It was subtle at first, a faint dizziness, moments of fatigue. She brushed it off, attributing it to the long hours spent adapting to human life. But as the days passed, the sensations grew stronger, compelling her to visit the medical bay. The doctors conducted thorough scans, their instruments humming softly in the dimly lit room. Elias stood by her side, his hand lightly touching hers. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together," he said. His presence gave her a strange sense of calm. After a tense hour, the lead doctor turned toward them with wide eyes. "Princess Lyra," she said slowly, "it appears you are pregnant." Lyra froze, the words echoing in her mind. She had been labeled barren by her people. Every specialist in the Arvelian Empire had confirmed it. Yet here was evidence of life growing within her. She looked at Elias, her eyes searching for answers, for understanding. Elias's face mirrored a mix of surprise and awe, but he did not falter. Instead, he held her hand firmly and said, "This is incredible. Truly incredible." Word of the pregnancy spread quickly through the fleet. At first, some officers were skeptical, believing it to be an error in the scans, but further tests confirmed the reality. Lyra, once thought incapable of bearing life, carried the potential for a new generation, one that could unite two species in a bond stronger than any treaty. The news reached the Arvelian Council. Their initial reaction was disbelief, quickly turning to astonishment. The Arvelian Emperor, who had once considered Lyra a failed princess, now regarded her with cautious respect. Envoys and advisors debated the implications for their empire. Some feared political complications. Others were amazed at the apparent miracle. Lyra, however, remained grounded. She did not seek power or recognition. She focused on her health, her studies, and her growing bond with Elias. Together, they walked along the observation deck at night, discussing their hopes for the child, their dreams for the future, and the responsibilities they would face. "You never doubted me," Lyra said one evening, gazing at the stars reflected in the dark window, "even when everyone else did." Elias turned to her, his expression serious yet tender. "Because I saw who you really are. Not the labels, not the rumors, not the judgments. Just you." Lyra felt warmth fill her chest, a mixture of gratitude, trust, and something deeper she had never experienced. She realized that Elias's respect and care had not only given her safety, but had restored her sense of self. For the first time, she believed in her own worth, and in the life growing inside her. As the pregnancy progressed, Lyra's confidence grew. She attended meetings, advised on fleet strategies, and became a symbol of hope for both humans and Arvelians. People spoke of the miracle child, a bridge between two worlds, born of courage, trust, and the unity of two very different species. Yet challenges remained. Some members of the Arvelian Council tried to assert influence over Lyra, insisting that she return to their empire. Others whispered that a human father could never be accepted as equal by Arvelian society. But Lyra faced these challenges with determination, supported by Elias. She spoke at diplomatic gatherings, asserting her autonomy and the right to choose her path. "I am not a pawn," she declared.
"I am Princess Lyra of Arvelia, and I have chosen my life."
"I will stay with Captain Elias Ward, and our child will belong to both our worlds, but I will not be forced into roles that others decide for me." Her words resonated. Diplomats, officers, and crew members alike began to see the strength in her voice, the courage in her choices. The princess, once labeled Barren, became a beacon of resilience. Finally, the day came when Lyra felt the first signs of labor. The medical bay was prepared, and Elias remained at her side without leaving once. The process was long, intense, and exhausting, yet she endured it with determination. She knew the significance of this child, not just as her own, but as a symbol of unity, hope, and the possibility of something greater. Hours later, the cries of a newborn filled the medical bay. Lyra held the child in her arms, a tiny being with features blending the best of both humans and Arvelians. Elias looked on, awe and love reflected in his eyes. He reached out to hold Lyra's hand, then gently touched the child's small form. "This is amazing," he whispered. "A new life, a new hope." Lyra smiled, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We did this together," she said. Her voice carried pride, relief, and wonder. "I never thought I could, but here we are." News of the birth spread across both fleets and empires. What was once considered impossible, a princess labeled Barren giving birth, became a story of inspiration and unity. Leaders from both species praised the courage and determination of Lyra and Elias, recognizing the significance of their actions beyond politics or duty. The Arvelian emperor sent a personal message to Lyra. In it, he expressed astonishment, respect, and a promise to recognize the child as an heir bridging both worlds. Lyra read the message with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her life had been forever changed, not by the judgment of others, but by the choices she had made, the trust she had given, and the bond she had formed with Elias. In the weeks that followed, life aboard the fleet settled into a new rhythm. Lyra continued to grow stronger, Elias remained by her side, and the child became a symbol of unity and hope. The crew treated the family with respect, admiration, and warmth. The once barren princess had not only discovered her own worth, but had also changed the course of history for both humans and Arvelians. On a clear night, Lyra stood on the observation deck holding her child close. Elias joined her, his presence steady and reassuring. Together they gazed at the stars, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. "You believed in me when no one else did," Lyra said softly. "I believed in us," Elias replied, "and together we will build a future worth living for." Lyra smiled, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. The whispers of doubt, the judgments of her own people, the fear of being unwanted, they no longer mattered. She had found love, trust, and purpose. She had borne life where it was once thought impossible, and under the endless stars, with her child in her arms and Elias at her side, the princess realized that the impossible was not just possible, it was reality. The barren princess was barren no more. She had not only survived the expectations of two worlds, but had transformed them forever. The galaxy watched in awe as a new chapter began, not just for a princess, not just for a human, but for the possibility of unity, hope, and courage across the stars. And somewhere in the quiet of the fleet, Lyra whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." The stars continued to shine, indifferent to politics or labels, yet they reflected the story of a princess who had discovered her strength, her worth, and the miracle that could grow when humans and aliens trusted one another. Elias and Lyra walked side by side, their child cradled between them, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And in that moment, the universe felt a little smaller, a little warmer, and full of endless possibility.